There are 2 participants in the conference. Please announce yourself.
Woodstock EDC. Okay, we will bring our meeting to calling to order at 7:01 on April 4th, 2019, a meeting of the Woodstock Economic Development Commission. We do have 2 members on the phone. Could you identify yourselves on the phone?
Barrett Goldstone.
Great, and?
Mika Sealy.
Thank you very much.
Mika Sealy.
And around the table, we have the rest of the commissioners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Fantastic. So because we have voters or members on the phone, we will be taking any votes by roll call, as is consistent. Yes?
I just read that it's only if it's not unanimous.
Only if it's not unanimous. Fair enough. Okay. And before we get going, we do have a new commissioner, N. Lawrence Niles, is joining us on the commission. This is his first meeting. Welcome to the meeting, Larry.
Thank you.
I've only known Larry since about 1980, and as both an attorney, a small business owner, member of the community, board member at the Woodstock Union High School way back so many years, and father of at least 2 children in the area, but also lives locally right on... Two, yeah. Right on Pomfret Road. So welcome, Larry. We look forward to your contributions. It's great. So with that, we'd open it up to our citizen comments, in which we invite members in our audience to give us some comments. Do we have any citizen comments? Yes, we have Beth Finlayson. And if you can speak clearly and loudly for the benefit of the people on the telephone.
Okay. I am coming with a request from the chamber and the merchants of the village to ask for support for the lights and flowers that the chamber has been incurring costs for at least 10 years, more. And
Thank you.
as a regular donation or contribution or line item from the Economic Development Commission budget.
Okay, and so it's part of our normal application process, but I thought we would be taking it up under other business. But in terms of, we had agreed to really discuss this from our last month's meeting as to the type of funding that you're talking about is recurring funding coming from the EDC budget, which our current policies say not to have those funds. And yet we do have funds in the beautification budget within the Economic Development Commission funds we had allocated before. So we need to discuss that under other business if that's okay. Yeah.
I
But
didn't know if it was citizen comment or not.
oh yeah, but it's good to know that. So just to know what requests that you may be looking at. Your total cost is $11,000 or $11,933.
Okay.
Right, for the 2 different things.
Do we want to talk about it
For the benefit
now?
of the folks at home and that deal.
Do we want to talk about it now or under other business?
Well, if you could just describe what your request is, and then
Okay.
we have to look at our policy under
The
other business.
request for this year is for about $7,000 for the flower baskets. I have included for 2020 purchasing 20 new baskets because these baskets will now be 11 years old and are well worn. We can use them for another year. So that's, for this year, you can take out the 3780.
Take out the
Okay,
what?
3780, because that's a 2020 request. And then the lights, and this is a very low number, is approximately $5,200 to $5,300. That does not include wood chippers, the donated labor, and the donated, from 2 tree companies.
Right, and so just for the benefit of the folks at home and also for the people that don't have the handout, so the flower basket is to the Woodstock Union High School greenhouse at $1,200, and the maintenance, which is paying an outside contractor to maintain the flowers throughout the entire season, which
Right.
goes from
Memorial Day
through October.
through Columbus Day weekend.
Columbus Day weekend. So that's $5,500. So there's $6,700 in hard costs for the flower baskets.
Correct.
And the holiday winter lights, you're talking about,
The hard costs are approximately 28, 25.
okay.
And then the other, I just wanted to show you what we contribute out of our budget, because we donate 2 memberships to both companies, and we donate full-page ad in our holiday, in our area guide to those people. And those are the actual costs.
So the chippers, what you have listed on here is dues, you're waiving those dues for those companies in
Correct.
return for the work that they do. And then the area guide ads is the area guide that you publish, those are the value of those ads, so that's an in-kind cost.
Correct.
Right, okay. So the actual hard cost is about $2,800.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay. So at least
This
that's,
year.
this year for 2020, 2019. Yes.
Am I allowed to make a comment on the comment?
Sure, citizen comments, yeah, that's what we're here for,
So
yeah.
during the village meeting, we voted on some money for beautification and I thought lights, and I wondered how that figured into Beth's calculations.
It is not there.
So we'll
I
have
hadn't noticed, you hadn't received notice about that, but, so that 5,000 is, we can deduct.
So there was approval from the
Wait.
village, you're saying $5,000?
Make a correction there. Just to be clear, the vote was for beautification, whether it's used for, to be determined by the trustees.
And last year, the village did allocate funds for the lights or the flower baskets, is that
I
correct?
did allocate some, yes.
Of the amount that you had allocated that year?
Yes, the previous year. This year, we have not allocated anything. It was voted to provide funds for us to disperse for beautification to be determined by the trustees. But, I'd like to comment, if I may. We recently had a meeting of the downtown merchants. And one of the things that came up that, and nobody was present from the EDC, actually, but there was a fair amount of dissatisfaction expressed by many businesses in the village that you should just be aware of. A sense that where is all this money going besides hiring consultants and so forth? Where are we going to actually see something? Where can we put our finger on it and say, that is where some of that 1% is going to? And so following that meeting, actually, I came to Beth and we discussed this. And we thought that although you in general, as a board, like to just do one-offs, your policy has been that way, it is possible, because you do have the money, whether you put it under beautification or you modify your rule, to say, you know what, we will support this in the winter and in the summer. The two things that make this village stand out for everyone, whether they live here or they're a tourist. Believe me, I hear people all the time saying, oh, I came in last night, it was so beautiful in the winter, seeing all the lights. In the summer, the flowers get the same reaction. That's an ongoing thing, and for years, it's been funded in a willy-nilly manner. I know I've been approached many times, can you put $50 in this year? And some stores do, some stores don't. They have
One year, the Vermont Standard did a full amount, which was,
It's just been scattered around, and I think it would be very appropriate for your board to consider funding this in some manner. Thank you.
Thank you, and we actually, for the select board, when the rules of our grant processes have been presented to the select board and they've approved them, it also, as part of that, said not for ongoing expenses. So we do need the select board to approve any kind of change in that process, so that's what we need to,
I understand.
yeah.
can I just make a comment? Last week, I had the town manager of Hanover call, and she said, what do you do for your baskets? We have baskets. They look nothing like your baskets. We want, so I put her in touch with John Hires, because he and the students are fabulous, sorry.
Kidding.
yes, we like to share. So,
And just a question on the high school for this, and I'm sure we can talk about it in greater detail later, but John Hires is purportedly retiring from the high school horticultural program. Is that true?
I don't know.
I think it is.
Already, he has the plans this year.
He has the plans, okay. So
Yes,
it's
and he's kind of waiting, hopefully, to hear something positive, because our board is going with this year.
You have some questions now? Well, so as I understand it, the figure may vary from year to year, is that correct?
Yes, it does vary from year to year. For instance, as Beth said, next year, the baskets themselves, which
Yes.
are organic,
Yes.
are not going to cut it. They've lived 11 years,
Yes.
and they need to be replaced. And what is necessarily charged to maintain them might vary to some extent from year to year. So it's not exactly fixed. Even the cost of the plants from the high school could change a little.
yep, they went up.
But, it's not going to be drastic in any one year, other than replacing the baskets.
So for the sake of simplicity, would it be easier, I'm just going to ask, and we can talk about it later, would it be easier to, as you alluded to and suggested, just have a line item in the EDC expenditures for baskets and lights, maybe cap it at a certain amount, and if some year it has to go over that amount, come in and explain why, and then we can vote on that, but if not, then we just simply say, we pay for the lights and we pay for the flowers.
That would make sense, Joe, and we have 10 years or more of expenses so that we could give you the numbers, and you would know this is what we could put in your,
Just to make it simple.
budget. If it
Just come
changed,
back
if
every
it
year.
changed, if it changed, obviously, the chamber could come back and
Yeah.
say, this year we need this. But other than that, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Thanks.
So we're still in citizen comments. Jordan?
Just a response, as a community member, anything that would go on to a repeating funding thing, so that this went in as a line item, I don't think, my own personal opinion is, as a community member, it's not appropriate for the EDC to be the group that okays, ultimately the trustees will okay it, but it seemed to me that's a larger issue. It should be part of the town budget that gets voted on by the whole town. So perhaps that was the original reason that the EDC was charged with only one-offs, because anything on an ongoing basis would be more appropriate for a larger constituency to have some say in. That's
Could I respond to that?
Well,
Just as a point of.
We don't want to get into a debate.
No, I don't want to get into a debate,
outside.
but I want to point out that when this bill, when it was passed by the voters, the 1% tax, what you're saying, it wasn't charged by the town of Woodstock. It was the board that was sitting at the time came up with the principles that are running it, and it was approved by the select board. It wasn't the people who said, no, you can't do anything ongoing. And, this is truly falls under the heading of economic development. So, I don't see why it shouldn't be considered.
Jeffrey, at risk of moving on, I think we'll move on.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Are there other citizen comments? Hearing none, we'll move. I will need to dial back in. We had a technical difficulty with our telephone call. So
The members of the commission.
please bear with us as we reconnect with our two lonely members out on the road.
Welcome. This service is provided
Thank you.
by free conference.
So nice to see you. Okay.
Are they texting you?
If you are the host, press star now. Otherwise, please wait, and you will be joined into the conference.
Sorry about that.
You are the only participant in the conference.
That is awesome.
It's
I'll
not
text
set for
them.
these.
I just did.
Okay.
Okay, yes, we don't have a, do we have a button on this now?
You know, I'll call in, and that'll turn it off.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Okay, we do have, the next is the approval of minutes of the March 7th meeting. You should have received an email with a link to the Dropbox for March 7th meeting. If hopefully you had an opportunity to read them, was there a motion to approve them as written?
A motion to approve.
Courtney moves, is there a second? Second. And Michael seconds. Welcome back. If you missed the earlier part of our recorded presentation, you're joining the EDC Live. There's a motion on the table to approve the minutes as written. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. We all said aye. Opposed, nay? Okay, since it's a unanimous, then we do not need to do a roll call according to your interpretation of the public meeting laws.
Yeah, I just noticed that the other day.
Okay, thank you, and we'll move on to the next, which is grant discussion. Grant discussion. Grant discussion.
Well, just an update on any of the projects, I put it in there just in case you wanted to update folks on what was going on.
You
Is that
want to do that
an
under
opportunity?
economic resources, or?
I have.
Michael and I have a quick update on the follow-up from last month.
Fantastic.
But we agreed that this is a grant in process. Is that a good way to describe it? We haven't approved it yet, but this is for Lifescape, and we said that we would establish an advisory committee to help advise them that would allow us to answer our questions about the product and so forth. The input that we wanted to have. Woody Thompson, who submitted the grant, was open to that. Michael and I crafted a proposed announcement to the community to invite advisory board members. We're checking with Woody to see if he's comfortable with the scope of that, which was very consistent with what we discussed. It's advice, and we haven't heard back from him yet, because we just sent it a few days ago. Is that accurate?
It seemed to tie in well with the presentation by Du Bois and King about different spots of interest in terms of if that actually became live to actually do that. So that
Absolutely, very
fascinating. Yeah.
Regarding the green bags, the Sustainable Woodstock's green bags application, the Economic Resources Committee decided at this time not to approve their grant application for the moment. They are waiting on the results of a survey that they just sent out last week, which should help them refine their methodology, a number of the questions that we had asked about how they would deploy the reusable bags. We felt lacked specificity enough, sufficient for us to recommend a grant at this point in time, and they are gathering more information from the survey that we hope will allow them to, supplement the grant application that they already submitted with specificity, a specific plan of deployment, and metrics that should support the numbers that they requested. So if they want to, we've invited them to submit a new grant application for the May round of granting with the results of that survey, and we will update you then if that happens.
And,
Great, thank you.
and I will just update on Park Run because Riverloop Trail will not be in place probably by Memorial Day weekend. They have been talking actually with the National Park, who has found a loop for them, so they are ready to go with that option for now.
And
Don't know where it's going to be, and I'm hoping it's not the same as Road to the Pogue because it's a little strenuous.
no, yeah. Just a question. I'm sure they'll be able to answer it, but in terms, there's a little logging going on in the national park.
Yes, yeah.
And they want to they'll work it out, I guess.
Yeah, they're looking at trail options right now.
Terrific.
Yeah.
All right, great. Any other grant updates? None? Okay, and then financial report. So you did receive a financial report from Sally. Again, it's posted to the website, and it's a good just segue. We do have a new connection on the town website at townofwoodstock.org. There is a button under boards and commissions, and where it says the EDC, it links onto this new site which has a compilation of all the minutes or archive of all the minutes from the meetings dating back to, I believe, 2014.
16, I think. Maybe earlier.
I think it's earlier, yeah, it goes back even further. So if you want to find all of the notes, it's quite interesting reading if you were a part of it at that time. It's really fascinating.
Charlie,
Yes.
germane to what you just said, just want to point out, I tried to get on there to see what the agenda was tonight. And your January meeting is the only agenda that I could find on the website,
Yeah, so there's,
just to let you know.
yeah, we've had a couple of, there are multiple links to the EDC pages from the town site, and we must have missed one of them. All of them now point to most of them point to the new EDC site. Ray also brought up the fact that there's a place where it isn't linked, so we'll go back and check. The new site is up, and the new pages are up, and it includes not just minutes, but every document that you have here, and similar documents for all of the meetings going back about 7 or 8 months, videos of all the last 7 or 8 meetings, the special meetings that we've had, grant proposals, all the approved grant proposals. It has a lot of material, far more than what's on the town site. But there are a couple links that are apparently broken. We'll check those as soon as possible. Thank you for bringing it up, yeah.
So,
Wait, do you want to report?
Yeah, can I just add to the financial report? So, this is consistent and slightly better than actually the numbers. We have some new numbers since the financial information that's in your packets was distributed, and I just want to highlight that the revenue, we're now forecasting revenue from the options tax of $288,000 this year. That's 8.5% higher than 2018. That was 6% higher than 2017, and that was 9% higher than 2016. So we've been growing at an average of about 8% for the last 3 years. I'd like to claim 100% of that success due to the EDC, but it might be due something to the fact that people are working hard in town to attract visitors and serve them well, including the chamber and the inn and all of the businesses. So we probably all share in it, but that's a pretty good growth rate. And again, we're not in favor of growth in taxes, but the options tax is a proxy for the level of tourism business, I guess is the best way to put it. And so that's a very healthy growth rate if it continues for the next period and a half, which is the minor part of our revenue. The mid-November to mid-February was up 16% over the year before, which is really quite extraordinary. I think just reflects the weather and also the good work that everyone's doing. So we were worried because the second period was only up 2%, and it looked like things were slowing down, but now the third period is up 16. So we're up 8.5 year over year.
So just to be clear as what you're talking about the amount of monies that were remitted to the town from the state for the collection of the 1% local options tax?
Correct.
Okay, so that was received in March?
The period that it covers, it was received in March. The period it covers, the 3 periods are half of July and half of August. It's a half a period. Then mid-August to mid-November, that was up 9%. August to November was up 9%. It was up 1.8%. Mid-November to mid-February is the most recent one. That was up 2%.
Yeah, so we can check those because I think what that actually reflects is the revenues for the fourth quarter ending December 31st. So that check that we just received is for the fourth quarter of 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is, it's consistent with the same times that we were. I was told something different, but either way, the growth it might be for a slightly different period.
Yeah. Okay. But still, it's remarkable.
But basically, this year is. First year we were up 9%. Second year we're up 6%. This year we're on track to be up 8.5%. So we're back on. We're at a pretty consistently solid growth rate, whatever the Christmas period. We should check that.
I'm wondering how many people will be curious about the dollar amount. How much money do we have in the bank that isn't already committed?
Yeah, so in the report, hold on, I don't know that number. So in the report, at the end,
Yeah, I don't think that's clear from this report.
Yeah, no, right at this minute, we probably have somewhere between $325,000 and $450,000 unencumbered. Probably about $375,000, I'm estimating. And so a good amount.
Yeah.
Okay. Any
Meaning a
other
lot,
questions
not a
on the financial
positive.
report? Okay, the quarterly report also was submitted ahead of time. This is a good question. If you have questions on the coordinator report, if you have a chance to read it. Anyone?
I wrote something down.
The only thing that I'll update is the community visioning group steering committee met this week. They have plans for a number of different activities that will be happening over the next few months. If anybody's interested in joining any piece of it, which we'll be getting word out about shortly, just let me know. So we're going to be looking for community members to help out with different projects as well.
Great. And how many did you have? 7 show up at that, or 11? I can't remember.
For our steering committee, I think we have 9.
9.
But we had a kickoff meeting with stakeholders, and I think we had 20 people here
Oh,
for that. So
okay.
that was
Fantastic.
2 weeks ago, and then the steering committee. So things are moving,
Good.
and it's going to be different than the VCRD community visit, because it's going to be a much longer process, but also a lot of different types of activities.
Okay.
I just didn't know what MPG was.
Miles per gallon?
I don't know. Oh, the municipal planning grant, probably?
Okay,
I don't
got
know
it.
Which one? I don't know. Reference.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions on the finances? Okay. And the coordinator report. So that gets us into EDC subcommittee updates. And just to check, Barry, do we still have you on the telephone?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. And Mika, are you back with us?
I sure am.
Thank you so much. Great. We're now into the economic resources reports. And who's reporting for the committee?
Am I doing that? Okay. So we have a brainstorming idea that we want to raise with the commission. We're not asking for any decisions. This is really important. This is something that the subcommittee discussed, and we think it's worth beginning a discussion about. It relates to, it's raising a large issue really about changing our approach and our priorities, not completely abandoning what we're doing now, but shifting. Very much, in fact, consistent with one of the aspects that you mentioned, Joe, about thinking about opening ourselves up to recurring investments, not because they're recurring, but because that would allow us to do bigger things. So what we want to put forward, at the risk of, actually, we want to encourage critique of this idea so that we can hear what people's concerns are about it. I mean, if everyone is unanimously in favor of it, fantastic. Maybe over the next couple of meetings we can adopt it. But if not, we want to hear a critique about it. You know, what are the concerns, what might go wrong, so that we can continue to develop the idea. I mean, unless everyone just completely thinks we're on completely the wrong path. So with that.
And I would just add that this discussion has occurred in part because over the last 4 meetings, we have come in to the commission over the last 4 meetings to discuss grants that have happened out of cycle, to discuss possible incentives for newcomers, to discuss a number of things that touch on new shifting, the EDC policy not quite accommodating different things that we're being approached to do, if that makes sense. So, and then when we learned about the flower baskets request, we thought, wait, hang on, we can't have yet another, we can't go in and keep saying, at some point, this is the norm. How are we going to deal with this norm? What does that mean?
So what are you saying, flexibility,
Well,
basically?
yes. Well, no. It's actually that's actually not. Yes, but that's not that's not the central part of the idea. I think the central idea, and I just want to connect it to one other comment that also Joe happened to make, which is, and you're not the only one who said it, which is that.
It starts with a J.
This is
Jeff.
Jeff.
Sorry, Jeff.
This is good.
I apologize, Jeff.
Jeff. Just don't call me Jeff.
I'm not sure who I offended more, but I apologize.
Be that as it may.
I'm sorry, Jeff.
Go on.
I know you are. That there are some concerns raised at the chamber meeting, and there have been concerns raised in other forms as well about what exactly is the EDC doing. So we have a 2-page note here. I won't read it, but it's available to all of you, and it's on our website already. And we really want to focus on 3 basic principles. Flexibility is a lower level of detail. These are the 3 principles. First is to put more emphasis on things which we think have the most direct connection to economic development. So really thinking harder about what directly affects economic development. Second is to focus on investments in larger projects, and to de-emphasize, not eliminate, but to de-emphasize smaller projects. And third is to be more proactive by reaching out to existing organizations and saying, how can we help, rather than mostly sitting back and receiving grants, other than planning grants, many of which we've initiated. So more direct connection, investments in larger projects, and being more proactive. Let me just give a quick detail on each of those, and then we can open it for discussion and critique. Here are the 5 things that we think have the most direct connection. Number 1, increasing housing availability and storefront utilization. We put those together because it's the same thing. It's real estate. It requires some economic incentives. Second is creating local jobs. By the way, we have examples of storefront utilization. We have a program there. Creating local jobs. Several of our grants have directly created more jobs. Rainbow School is one example. Third is removing constraints to economic development. Things like funding childcare, which we've done, or possibly lobbying or advocating for changing policies, which we haven't yet done, but we've talked about. So removing constraints is third. Fourth is marketing Woodstock to increase its visibility. We've obviously been extremely active in that area. And fifth is enhancing Woodstock's attractiveness to local residents and to visitors, which is one of the factors that we've discussed. And we think that if we can get more clear about those 5 objectives in perhaps the way we organize ourselves, the way we talk about ourselves, and applying those criteria to the grants and other expenditures that we might more directly support economic development. Larger projects, we feel like we could have a larger impact if we did fewer projects that were larger. To do that, we need larger projects. And that leads to and we don't have larger projects. We've only had a couple. And so we can't fund what we don't have, and that leads to the third objective, which is to be more proactive. That does not mean that we will create the larger projects. We want to, other than planning projects, which we've launched several of, our objective, our proposal here is to be proactive by reaching out to other organizations and saying, how can we help? Maybe it's to the Woodstock Inn to say, or maybe it's to the owners of the Bentley's building, or maybe it's to the Woodstock Foundation, which we know is interested in housing, or maybe it's to the Chamber to say, how can we help beautify? So it's not trying to take over the role of the community, but it is trying to proactively catalyze larger proposals. And so if we were to do this, we would need to change some of our criteria. We would probably allocate a small portion of our budget to community grants, maybe $30,000 a year, let's throw out a number. And we would then need to organize ourselves to be proactive in these areas and to try to reach out and so forth. So it might require a slight reorganization. We already have subcommittees on marketing. We already have subcommittee on making initiative to make Woodstock more attractive in terms of the trail, for example. We might want to create something around housing and storefront utilization. So it would affect the criteria that we use for investing, and it would affect changing the policy in terms of not funding recurring payments. If we were to try to buy a building or help someone buy a building, we couldn't do that with a $5,000 grant in 1 year. We'd probably have to commit money over multiple years. So again, you can see that this is a very broad proposal. Proposal is too strong a word, idea. We're laying it out in public because this is a public meeting, but we're not. This is a small group that sort of said this is something, thinking about these kinds of issues are the kind of things that the commission should be thinking about over the next few meetings. So with that,
And some of this does come from also the fact that the Economic Resources Subcommittee has been addressing, because we are the committee that receives the community grants, so we vet those. But we also have a number of different roles, which have now, we did the storefront initiative, we did the housing grant, there are a lot of different roles, and it has felt very dispersed, and also as if it's not as focused as it could be, and it's also really time consuming. So.
Well, thank you. So now we'll open up to comments from the commission.
Yeah, I'd like to comment. I think this is great. We brought it up a bunch of times already. I think, I've sat here just so many times just looking at grants and just these tiny little grants on things that just didn't completely make sense to me. We have a savings account of about X, You know, it's just like your own savings account. What are you going to work on first if you own a business? Has the highest return, right? And so we got to make some pretty hard decisions on where to put money, where we can get something out of it. And quite frankly, I think a lot of the very small grants we have don't have a lot of firing power around them, and we're not going to see a lot of return at the end of the day. So I think if we can really nail down and we can influence that and partner with other community players to have a bigger impact, I think, and again, there may be other dollars out there that can bring that together and make it happen. You know, there is, I mean, I'm looking at the revitalization of this study. I mean, this thing alone, this is huge. There's a lot of money that has to be behind that to really, really get this town to where, you know, the merchants want to step out their front door and be very proud of it. So, but I applaud this effort. I think this is the right direction to go.
Okay, Joe?
I think, Charlie, this sounds to me very important. I mean, you know, I'm one of the original members, and to me, this sounds as important as it was from the first ground rules that were laid when this commission was initiated. I would suggest to the commission that we have a separate meeting. And instead of waiting 2 or 3 months and getting a little bit of feedback, just say, hey, listen, let's meet and talk about this exclusively for one meeting and see what we come up with. That would be my suggestion.
Totally agree.
Yeah, and then we would just get the newest guy on the commission to organize it, and then we'd be all set.
There you go, Larry.
We already signed it up for it.
Yeah. You know, I think it's a worthwhile initiative, and it's not that we haven't considered larger projects in the past. I mean, when we did our RFI for extending broadband, high-speed broadband to every home and business, every premise in Woodstock, we came back with 4 different proposals from different telecom companies, and it was an estimate of about $4 million. Each one of them was about the same. So the question for us at that point is this feasible? Is that a reasonable use of funds to actually try to pay down that bond? It would have to be a bond. And that wasn't even feasible at the time with the laws they were the way they were. And now that has changed a little bit. But there's still a conflict of, do you get enough take rate? Are you pushing out? And, you know, so that may not be the right initiative to make sure that everybody has 100 gigs up and 100 gigs down from a fiber optic provider at everybody's house. But something like that is not out of the stretch of the funds that we have available on an ongoing basis to fund it.
And part of what we were reacting to is exactly what Jeff raises, that we have funded a great number of studies. We now have a lot of metrics. We have a lot of knowledge and information about what can be done, what is needed to be done. Now it's about doing something about it.
We finally have some big projects between the River Loop and the revitalization. You know, when I started a year ago, there was a lot of talk about big bets, and then it just ended. And there was nothing that came along until now. So we actually have a couple of potential big bets.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm new, of course, but I'm wondering if it would be more palatable not to put a limit on the smaller community grants, simply emphasize our interest in larger grants rather than saying there's going to be a top end for smaller grants.
Yeah. That's a good point, and that's why we have a grant cycle set up. It's just we have to make it so that it minimizes the work of the grant committee, because it is exhausting, I think, for the group as well. Then, Mika, would you like to weigh in on this, or Barry?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Barry.
Oh, go ahead. I was on the part of the subcommittee discussion, and I think both John and Julia represented it perfectly.
Great, thank you. And Mika?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I agree with everything that everyone has said, particularly the bit about that Joe had said about having a separate meeting. I think that would be a great idea. I also, Larry, hi, I've never met you before. It's nice to meet you. I also like what you said about the keeping the community grants. That is one part that, you know, I would want to make sure that the community still knows that there is a pool of money available for them that we really do focus our efforts elsewhere.
Great. So the sense of the commission is to have a separate meeting to really fully discuss this and fully flesh it out so that we can go forth.
Fantastic.
And so should we delegate this to the Economic Resource Committee to actually schedule it with everyone, or should we just dedicate our next monthly meeting to this only?
I would suggest we have a separate meeting, and we just go on with our regular scheduled meeting, and have a meeting set aside just to discuss this project. I think that, I mean, because there might come up that we have to address, we'd have to put it off for another month, and rather than do that, just get this talked about.
As long as people are willing to make the time, that's the most interesting part of it all. Yeah.
We can put together a doodle and send it out.
All right, so Julia Cook has volunteered to send out a doodle poll to get the members invited. And of course, it is a public meeting in terms of being open to the public, but it would be a duly warned meeting of the EDC.
Great.
Okay.
This is more than, I didn't think we would get this far, so this is fantastic.
Good.
We look forward to it.
Well, it's important.
Yeah.
It is important.
Thank you. And so with that, we do have, just before we go off economic resources, we do have the next funding round. The applications are due by the end of May. Is that correct? May 29th, I believe, for a decision then in the following July, I believe. And so with that, we'll move off unless there's anybody else on economic resources, and we go to civic revitalization.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Joe.
Moving quite along. We had this presentation that was done by D&K on the 21st. I was impressed with the attendance. I think we had a really good turnout. There were some great questions. There was a lot of citizen involvement. And things were learned. At least I learned a few things. Well, as a result of that, I met with Phil Swanson for quite a while. And we discussed, what happened at the meeting and how to move forward and some ideas that he had and he shared with me. As a result of that meeting, one of the ideas we came up with is in order to expedite things and get things moving in the right direction, rather than just rely on the three of us, Beth, Ray, and I, to come up with the whole process. Phil and I talked about the idea of having Sophie, who made the presentation on the 21st, join us one day a month. Now, we meet every week, but she can come down and spend 2 hours once a month for the specific reason, not to just chat, but to make decisions and how to implement some decisions that we arrive at during that time. We could probably meet or come up with some things in between the time that we meet with her, but when she gets here, her whole purpose of being there is really show us how to get things going and get things moving along. Ray spoke with her and came up with a budget of $4,000 for the year for her to come down once a month, spend 2 hours with us. I think, no, I know that the important ingredient would be have some involvement with other people other than us and Sophie. So I spoke with Jack Rossi, who is a local landscape architect and also a member of the Village Design Review Board, and asked him if he would join us if Sophie could come down, and he said he'd be more than happy to. Just to make sure that we have some really good ideas that we can work with. Jack's a bright guy. He has a lot of experience in this sort of stuff. So that's one of the things that Phil and I came up with. We talked about, there seemed to be a lot of discussion at the 21st meeting about signage. And my feeling is that, and what we discussed with the rest of the committee was, I don't think it'd be a good idea, or we don't think it'd be a good idea to have the town loaded with all kinds of signs, wait for your signs, about this and that and everything. So I've been thinking about, it was suggested to me by somebody smarter than me, that we ask somebody like T-Belial to get involved. And when that that suggestion came up, the first thing I thought about was, well, the initial attempt to brand Woodstock with a logo and everything else didn't seem to go over all that well. So I think it might be an opportunity to revisit that with somebody like T. Blau, who was very instrumental, I think, in the initial project, wasn't he, Charlie?
Yes.
Yes, he was. And see, if he's willing to join us and come up with maybe modifying the original logo somehow and coming up with maybe some ideas as a graphic design artist of developing signs. Like I said at the meeting, I think the important thing about signs is to educate people without them realize they're being educated, and have his input into the kind of signs that could be well utilized without flooding the town with signs all over the place. So I'm going to get a hold of him and ask him if he'd be willing to get involved with. And this would also involve Sophie and the rest of us, rather than just being individual. Go ahead, Charlie, you got a question?
I do have a question, and I have two different questions, because I think what you're talking about is really putting in implementation steps of parts of the report from Du Bois and King.
So, yes, parts so far.
Parts of it,
They're
right.
not possible.
Is to really say, these are all the suggestions, and would like to actually pick off these as being doable or affordable or desirable.
And visual.
All right, and so that's one, so I think you're looking at prioritizing that. The second, and I'm wondering, because it looks like, does it belong underneath the EDC umbrella? Does it belong underneath the town umbrella, and within the planning commission? And then we have this visioning process going on, so there's a lot of
Yeah, I think you're right.
things
And,
going
yeah,
on
I think you're right, Charlie. There's a lot of stuff that run parallel. And when I mentioned that to the person I was speaking with, it's come back and go, a lot of things are, running parallel. There are a lot of things going on and I don't know whether it'd be under the umbrella of this new visioning thing that's going on to incorporate everything. I'm not sure. I did speak with Jill about sidewalking, and one of the things that seems, it almost completely controlled one of the meetings we had with the local folks was, what about the sidewalks? What about the sidewalks? Well, I think the sidewalks is a town issue. That's what I think. Town or village issue. I don't think the EDC should get involved with the sidewalks as a problem, and that we have the responsibility of taking care of that problem. It may come down to funding. Maybe they're not coming to us for some, that might happen. I don't know. I can't predict that. But as far as the sidewalk issue itself, I don't think, in my opinion, that it should become under the EDC umbrella to solve that problem. It is a problem, but is it our responsibility? I'm not quite sure.
Well, I mean, another way to phrase that is, does the fact that our sidewalks are not optimal decrease our economic viability? Like, is it an economic issue? And as John put it, the last time
I think
this
that
came
gets
up,
to be a little bit of a
and
stretch.
I don't think that it
Yeah.
really.
Well, I mean, I get back to when I return on investment, like, it's not the first thing I would do. But I have to say something about that. I think I kind of agree. If you look at, if I got this, I may have this wrong. At Killington, that money went all the way into roads, right? Because they just lost all that 1% because it really got taken over by the town to do a project they didn't have funds for. So they said, oh, we'll just grab that money and do it. So the whole thing kind of fell through.
Court, I don't know exactly the process that happened in Killington. There was something like that went on, for as far as I read. Maybe Charlie knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, they're using it to pay down the bond on the golf
course.
course.
Did they dissolve the EDC or something that took that money and threw it into the highway program or something? Is that what they did?
They had a sales, local option tax on sales, rooms, meals, and alcohol.
Yeah.
And they created this new economic development group, and they had an economic development director, and went through several iterations. And the long story short is they're using the proceeds of the rooms, meals, and alcohol tax, or tax generated by rooms, meals, and alcohol, primarily to pay down the bond or pay down the debt on the golf course.
Yeah,
And the
that's
sales
right,
tax has
golf
been,
course.
the local options tax on the sales has been repealed. So that takes all the revenue off of the lift ticket sales and oil sales.
That's why we're serving apples.
I'm sorry?
That's why we're serving apples. We don't want that to happen.
Oh, pizza. But, so I hope that answers your question. I don't really know all the details.
No, I mean, I'll make a comment on the logo thing, because I was involved with a ton of other people on that, and, you can keep doing logos over and over and over again. Nobody's ever been pleased. I was not a big fan of the logo, but I didn't hate it either. When we went through the whole process, it came to the point where, like, you know what, I can live with this. This is something I can get to be recognizable, and it's just gonna happen. I mean, you'll spend a lot of time on it. I don't know. I mean, what did we spend, 1.5 years on that? Maybe 2 years?
And that was the second iteration.
Yes. So there was I love the process. I thought the process was really good. I thought the elimination.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I don't think we should get bogged down with that, with the logo thing, but it was just something that popped into my head while we were talking about signage, to incorporate maybe a greater version of the past effort, and ask if T can probably help us out with that. It might be something we could do.
I do say that being in the tourism business, and we are in that business in this town, that some of those people are involved with that, because they completely understand a guest or a visitor here having to move around this space and seeing all the attractions that we do have. And that was what I thought was really cool in this report, because even myself, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how hard it was to going behind the History Center and enjoying that, those type of things.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I think it would be favorable for us if we develop signage that when people look at it, they say, that's a Woodstock sign. That doesn't, it's a Woodstock sign. It's telling me something about this town. And maybe without having to read the whole thing, if there's something up there like a logo, or if there's a consistent design, or consistent color, or something that somebody with greater imagination than I have, they can put together, and when people come to town and look at that sign, it's a Woodstock sign. It's something about Woodstock. It's not about, you can't turn left here.
The report's saying exactly that.
Or there's no parking there, or something like that. It's just, it's something about the town.
We have Barry on the line. Barry, want to say something?
I've got a number of thoughts. So I thought that the part of the study was going to be to kind of prioritize these efforts. So we'd have at least kind of some basis to choose. I think the revitalization effort, it does seem like at this point it's something that needs to fit in with the town in a village plan. It's got to be one comprehensive package. I think wayfinding, as the report said, wayfinding is important, but it's a piece of the whole. I mean, there may even be things about the overall image, maybe just the shape and style of benches, or the color of garbage cans, or lights. It's all a piece of a whole. I think that logo is that's kind of a granular detail that may become part of a discussion at some point. But I think we need to step back and look at the larger picture. What is the one overall image? And then what are the town and village commitments to making that happen? And if they need some economic help, then they approach the EDC for it.
That's a reasonable
for some of it.
But as somebody who spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, uniform can get a little obnoxious after a while.
But to the point about the prioritization of the projects.
I just want to hear so the study was good, and my father-in-law used to say, if you pay somebody for advice, you should take it. And so I think we should not second guess what they're advising too much.
Okay. Point made. And so I guess, Joe, is it? I get a sense from the.
What about Mika? She got something to say?
Nah. No, just kidding. If Micah, Mika, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly sure where the conversation is going. In terms of Sophie coming down for a couple of hours a month or a year, it sounds like really a couple hours a month for the rest of the year.
Right.
That seems like money, it seems like cheap money, for sure. And it seems like it could be a good idea. I did get the sense from the audience at the presentation, which was excellent, that, a lot of people would like to be involved, and I recognize that that's a slippery slope. And, how do you make decisions for everyone, with everyone, without actually involving everyone and all that? So, there's some questions in there for me personally about how to handle that. But I just want to say that out loud and acknowledge that one thing that was said repeatedly was the interest in having input.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Sally to put on a different hat for a minute, the hat of the head of the Planning Commission. Does the Planning Commission want to weigh in on what the recommendations were from Du Bois and King?
I think they would be glad to. We're dealing with some other significant issues right now, and I'm not sure that the village revitalization is quite at the same level of some rewriting our town plan and the work that we're doing, but they certainly would love to, I'm sure.
Well, I think just on that, to build on both of these last points, Micah's and Sally's, that we said at the meeting, people asked, and the two of you basically said that, doesn't have to be right this minute, but in the next day or so, there should be a follow-up. I think people are expecting a follow-up meeting that includes, but is broader than, at least the opportunity to be broader than the 5 or 6 people that you mentioned have already agreed. So I would suggest that...
I'm not quite sure what type of meeting.
Remember, you said that we would announce at this meeting, people said, how can we get involved? And we said, we'll announce at this meeting when we're going to meet. So I think...
Our subcommittee meetings.
Right, the revitalization. Yes. So I think that if we don't do it, you don't have to do it tonight, but we now have a calendar on the website.
We meet every Tuesday, approximately 10:30 at Monday.
And is that...
Have you heard that place down the street on that?
You bought it.
No. Is that, but would you like to, I guess my...
You can drop in and say, yeah, I got an idea about this, or I'd like to talk about that, sure.
But in terms of the next step of prioritizing what the next steps were recommended by Du Bois and King?
I'm still getting to it.
Yeah, okay, so that's where I think, even if you have a meeting saying the subcommittee has met, we've looked at all the recommendations, this is what we think should be prioritized, and we'd like your feedback and input.
Well, what I think is what we talked about was out of the 4 meetings a month, one will be with Sophie for a couple of hours and probably somebody else. What I plan on doing is to task Sophie with specific stuff. Listen, this is what we want to talk about for the next 2 hours when you get down here. It's going to be decisions that need to be made, how to enact those decisions, who to approach, and how to get things done, essentially. So the other 3 is going to be pretty much progress reports, or if somebody wants to drop in and say, I want to contribute this idea, I want to talk about that, fine, they can do that too.
Well, even before you get to the point where Sophie's coming down here, giving her specific tasks, there needs to be some kind of direction from a greater community group to say, this is now not what just Joe or Beth and Ray want, but what we've decided based on the community input.
That's right.
Right? So it seems like that has to be the next meeting, a public meeting, not just at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays in Mount 10:30, sorry. But maybe, or it could be, but it's just really well publicized that people are invited to come.
Okay, I mean, I think that's a great idea. But, before we announce that meeting, we have to decide what we're going to meet about, right? And that's going to take a few more meetings of us with Sophie, I would think.
Jill?
You asked Sally if the Planning Commission wanted to be involved. I think at the meeting we heard that the Beverly Humpston and the Development Review Board desperately want to be involved. Design sorry. Okay.
That's Jack Ross.
That's Jack, and more than Jack. They almost saw themselves as having an element of approval, I think, the way she put it, because they are our design and development board.
Right.
So it would be good to work with them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, I mean, just to have a meeting, I don't think is something I would be crazy about. I think once we get a really good idea about the direction, how to achieve goals, and get their input from the public, then we can have a meeting, I would think.
Well, I think they'll want, like, when you get to the stage of choosing the bench, choosing the recycling bins, and things like that, they will want to be part of your decision-making.
Sure, but, before it happens, I think we're gonna have to decide, or not decide, look at varieties of recycling bins, how much they're gonna cost, different benches, what they might look like, how they're gonna cost, and of course, these all have to go before the trustees and the select board before, we can't just unilaterally make that decision, is what I'm saying. We have to, I think our role will have to be doing the legwork of gathering information in terms of what designs are available and how much they're going to cost. And the decision-making process is going to have to be involved with the trustees and the select board.
So I'm saying before you come to the trustees and the select board, go to the design review board.
Well, Jack Rossi is on the design review board.
And the rest of the board.
An invitation. They may not all want to go, but
No.
certainly an invitation to
Express
the
me.
entire board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Susie
was behind you.
Well, I was just in the audience when they were presenting, and there was a lot of people a lot of members of the community who wanted to have input on this, because there was talk about, do we take down the flyers that are in the green right now and replace it with something that's more tourist friendly, and there was a lot of, alarm going on between people, and so when we started talking, then we got cut off and said, now's not the time to talk about it, but when is the time to talk about it? I mean, if you're going to make these decisions and say, well, we're going to fund benches and recycling things, and here's how we're going to do the sign, when do we actually get input into that?
I would suggest that the time for that to happen is when we gather the information about what the options are that are available, and we make that presentation to either the design review board or the trustees or the select board, and people can come to those meetings and give their input on how they feel about these things. Because we're not going to decide what trash can to use. We're not going to decide, what bench to put up. That isn't what we're going to do.
No,
What we're going to do is do the legwork. And
I guess the issue is that things like, okay, you're going to decide that we can't have flyers about local events coming up in the green.
That would be a chamber decision anyway. I mean, we own that building.
we don't make that decision.
And, yeah.
I think the central point might be that that strategy may run the risk of wasted effort or time if the public doesn't have a chance to buy in at some point.
Sure. And I think
Same time, there's too many cooks in the kitchen.
Totally.
I mean,
That's
this-
right.
And
to
Anna raised a
choose
very
one
good
trash
point
can
that
is going to take a year. If you
design
got
by committee
500
usually
people
doesn't
looking
come
at
out
it.
right.
we just don't want to get into
I think
that.
the risk is
Yeah.
you really have to figure out a way to streamline this process, otherwise nothing is going to get implemented.
And that's why we want to bring Sophie down here for once a month. And I really feel that the place to streamline and the place for input is at either the trustees meeting, select board meeting, where the presentations are going to be made. This is what we found. This is how many varieties of trash cans there are. This is how much they cost. What do you think? And the town, and all the public can get involved.
Can I disagree with that one
Okay.
process point? I think that and this is maybe a little bit what Susie was saying, I think if that's the way we proceed, I do think we will get input at those times.
Right.
But I think it will not happen for 2 months or 3 months, let's say. And I think people will feel that they weren't given a chance to have input. Even though they have a chance at the select board meeting to stand up and say it, I think they'll feel that they didn't have a chance to say it. I think the sense of the meeting in this room, which I thought was a great meeting, by the way, I thought it was a good meeting and a good presentation. I think the sense was, okay, the next step is, if you all have feelings about the things we've discussed, we'll meet to hear those feelings and take those into account as we do our work going forward.
Sure.
That was
Which is not to say that every concern will be addressed.
Right, so I feel like.
So, given that.
Yeah, that's just at least the way I took
John,
this.
what do we meet about?
I think just.
Wait, let me finish. If we're gonna have a meeting,
Yeah.
right, what are we meeting about?
Here's what you all.
I mean, we have to come up.
Let's say this was the
We
meeting.
have to come up with material for them to
Yeah, I'm
discuss.
gonna answer your question.
You asked the question, let him
Yes.
get.
Let's say this was the meeting, I would basically say, okay, you were all together 4 weeks ago, let's say the meeting's 2 weeks from now, and as a reminder, here's one page of the 7 things we talked about in that hour and a half. Everyone wanted to have input, let's just take the next 90 minutes, and let's just go around and hear what your input is. For us, the 3 of you and Jack and whoever, so that we'll take that into advisement, because we're about to start doing the legwork. But first, we want to take 90 minutes, and so your presentation would be about 45 seconds long. And then it would be 90 minutes listening to what the people say, and then take that into account.
And I would add that also would serve to, my only fear about, I think this presentation is wonderful, and I think Sophie's great, I think Du Bois and King has done a great job.
Good.
My only fear is that the focus may become more on things for tourist attracting things, at risk of prioritizing things that will make Woodstock, the second half of that, people who want to move here. We are tasked as an Economic Development Commission with higher quality visitors, to converting visitors to residents. And the same things on an on a town level, don't attract the same kind of people, the same priorities. One thing does not attract both of those groups of people. So I would hate for the revitalization to be exclusively prioritizing the tourist element at the cost of the resident element. And I think that a way to simply take the temperature of what the resident element is to let the resident element speak. So I think that's.
I think we run into the danger of endless meetings.
Well, no, but you can always have.
So what I'm saying is, Charlie, let me finish.
I just want to go back to something that Joe said quite a while ago, which was talking about developing a Woodstock sign, but also talking about having a consistent design, color, sort of a style. I think that if you focus on that to start with, the decisions about trash cans, benches, signage, all kind of have to fall into that. So that's a much broader discussion. People don't necessarily have to get into the nitty-gritty. Once you've established your palette, your colors, we've been talking about this for something else, but I mean, that's something that people can then buy into, and then you have a much easier decision down the road. Do you want it modern? Do you want it traditional? Do you want, these are sort of general design decisions that you can make at a very high level, which will make the process a lot easier.
Well, that's a good idea.
I've had my hand up.
Hang on, Barry, we've got 2 people in the room, and then you. We've got Beth and Ray, and then Barry. Yeah.
As someone that was at the meeting, that has been participating, and has had a fair amount of discussion with merchants and others about downtown, I think we hear you loud and clear, and we'll figure out a public meeting. And it doesn't mean that the committee's going to expand to 40 people, because it can't. But having input from those 40 people is important. And we will set up a time to do that before the end of the month, so that we can report back at the May meeting. We also, as part of this discussion, we did talk a little bit about prioritization, because there are things that you could do for very little money. I mean, that the community can do.
Yeah, we talked.
And, maybe it's the wall in the alley going to the Welcome Center. That's easy, inexpensive. And, public safety is part of it. It's not tourist related, it's public safety. If you look at our crosswalks right now, they're non-existent. You can't see them. I mean, we need to talk about that. And so we will have a public meeting, and the other thing that we are going to do is set up a time with Gary Holloway.
Well, I can get to that. I'll get to that.
No, it's my turn. You have talked.
John.
Anyway, no, Gary Holloway, who is the head of the downtown organization, just to hear if there's an opportunity here for that to, for us to become a designated downtown or not. But that will also be a meeting with trustees, select board, planning commission, maybe design review, whatever. But it will be a larger meeting just to listen to him and to ask questions about that program. What? No, I will, and I will do it when you're back.
So Ray?
I have been investigating, looking at trash cans and benches, so I invite anyone that wants to see the 5,000 odd different types of trash cans to go online, type in trash cans.
I've looked before, yeah.
We get too many people involved. We should be able to reduce this to a few for choices and not have 5,000 different ideas in trash cans.
Nobody said this was going to be an easy process.
No, I understand that, but a year and a half for a logo, it could take 3 years for trash cans.
But I think what she was saying is different. I mean, it's not a question of, I don't think the community really cares whether you're going to have a green trash can or a brown trash can, but where are you going to put your priorities? Is it going to be towards the stuff that attracts and is helpful to residents, or is it only going to be for tourists? What she said was really, really important, and I think that that's what the community was talking about during that meeting.
Well, we had Barry waiting on the line. Barry?
Yeah, so I hear a lot of, I guess this is a question for Joe, Beth, and Ray. And I'm hearing a lot of focus on garbage cans, benches, painting the alley, and these are all things we've talked about for years. And so I'm wondering what is maybe the three most important kind of overriding takeaways from this study, or maybe surprises. What is it about the study that brings all of this together, all these parts that we've always been talking about?
I don't know. He's not gonna know.
No, it's a question. What is it about?
Was that rhetorical, or were we looking for someone to answer that?
Yeah, no, that was a real question.
Who would you like to direct that to?
We've always known about.
Yeah, I think it's still too granular at the moment.
The subcommittee, either Joe or Beth or Ray, whoever feels.
Go ahead, Beth.
We're not ready. I mean, quite honestly, we've talked about benches, we've talked about pots, we've talked about trying a miniature bump out or a test bump out to see if that calms traffic a little bit. Those are all things that we've talked that are easy, low-hanging, something that for very little expense, we can try something at the crosswalk by Gillingham's because it's a death trap, or at the crosswalk at High Street because people don't see and stop there. So we've talked about some of those smaller things, but I think having the community say, yeah, let's try something at the crosswalk, or no, what are you, nuts, is probably something we should hear before we go forward.
Sounds great. So it
And
sounds
we'll
like
do it.
If you have these ideas and bring them to that meeting, a meeting like that, then
Seems to me the report I read today, and I read it in its entirety today, it covers almost all of that.
It does.
And so I think it's just getting this meeting together, start figuring out where you're gonna go. And I think it's a longer term plan, you know, we're not gonna have all the money to do all this stuff right away. And you're gonna have to start picking away at the first year, the second year, the third year, until you get it, and it's never gonna end. So.
No, because then the
The plan has to be there.
fall
And
apart.
and Sally's right on about, it's a brand too, at the same time. We gotta think about that.
All right, one more comment, and then we're going to move on. Jeffrey?
Okay. So at that meeting, there was a lot of talk about low-hanging fruit, and some of the things you've been talking about, like nice garbage cans and recycling bins and benches, which you talked about how getting public input and then coming up with and going before the right boards and getting done. All that can happen this year. For that kind of low-hanging fruit, it's not a lot of money. Does the EDC have a funding mechanism to fund those low-hanging fruit items on here? Or is this something that EDC is trying to just pass off as an idea for other organizations to fund. You guys have the money. I don't mean guys. You, as a board, you have the money to do this, especially the low-hanging fruit.
Well, it flows back into the discussion we had earlier about
Yes.
priorities.
And
This was the
I think that's
report,
where we're
which
getting to.
everybody says was so good. It was
Yeah.
such a good report. She recommended, here's the low-hanging fruit.
Well, all of the things cannot be done with EDC money. It's just, there's, right? so
And should
it's
not
partial.
be, because
Perhaps not
economic
all.
development
Like-
does not
like the
exclusively
sidewalks. Like
hinge on
the sidewalks, which were a big
benches
deal.
and sidewalks.
But things that could be done quickly and make a visual difference and affect positively locals as well as tourists, like garbage, nice garbage cans that everyone uses, and improving that walkway to the Welcome Center, which everyone uses, the bathrooms. That could be done in a year. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
Did I not see your hand up earlier?
I didn't want to cut you off. I just have one suggestion, is that there's two kinds of meetings you could be talking about. One is where you're specifically going to discuss this report, and you're going to focus on this report, and you're going to expect people to have read the report, and you expect people to, put a finger on the page of the report so that you actually get through the report. And the other is that you're talking about the topic in general. And I think when you announce the meeting, if you want the former, you need to be very clear about that. And when people raise issues or questions, you should make sure that everybody gets to the same page of the report.
Thank you. So, Joe, were you completed?
No.
No.
But thank you for asking.
7:50 you started.
I know it. It's
So please
it's amazing.
continue.
All right, so let's, I'd just like to share with you what has been done so far. All right, since March 21st. As I said, I met with Sophie, and I spoke with Michael Brands about the downtown designation. He wasn't too hot on the idea. I spoke with Phil, and Phil admittedly said, I don't know anything about it, but I really would like to learn. So why don't you guys go ahead and try to organize that and see what it's all about, and decide then, after we spoke with Gary Holloway, whether or not we want to do it. And so then I gave it to Beth, and Beth is going to speak with Gary and get it organized for a specific day. Now, talking about funding and how to pay for some of this so-called quote-unquote low-hanging fruit. There are a couple of things I think that might be beneficial and visual that could be made to happen, and that could be generated by private money, I think. For example, the wall on Mechanic Street. I spoke with Liza, who is the kind of conduit between me and the owner of the building, okay. And we tried to get this done, her and I tried to get this done many years ago, and it couldn't happen. But since this latest report and how it was mentioned unsolicited in the report about something that would make Woodstock attractive, and I think it's a good point to say, attracted to everybody, even the people who live here. I mean, yes, tourists are gonna come in and say, oh, that's nice, but I think some of the people who live here will also say, boy, this is a great place to live. I love living in Woodstock. So it's gonna benefit everybody, not just the tourists, I think, some of this stuff. So I spoke with an artist who has a big reputation of doing murals in Florida and in Sweden, of all places. So he is going to get back to me what something like that might cost. And I spoke with Matt Powers a couple of times about resurrecting the old fountain in the center of town. What's going on with that? Is it still around? The legend was that it was taken apart to melt down for the war effort, and apparently that wasn't true. It just got scattered up and dispersed amongst the town some places. So he's going to look into that more. And he gave me the names of some companies down in Massachusetts that resurrect these kind of things, and I'm gonna get a hold of them. That, I think, can be done with private money also. So, to answer some of these questions about money, that's a couple of ways we can go. I don't think we have to, quote unquote, depend on this low-hanging fruit exclusively from the EDC. We can probably get people who are interested in making the town look good to contribute, and who are willing to contribute, and have the means to contribute. I think that can be done. That's part of what we've done. Ray, as he mentioned, he's going to look into more the trash cans, the benches, pots, and I'm going to see if I can get a hold of T-Blau and see if we can get them involved with helping us design and making some signs that might look good for Woodstock. I think Sally's point's an excellent one. Have it all pulled together, and people saying, that's Woodstock. That's a good thing. I'm done.
Let the record show.
So we look forward to hearing about your meeting.
Thank you.
You'll be invited.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
I still want to.
You have a question?
I think to your point, that public meeting, it does need to be directed in some way and facilitated in a very specific way. I think I think that's all. If you could just do that for that public meeting, you have a public meeting and it needs to be specific. It needs to say, this is what we're talking about. That's it. Moving on. You need to give people the opportunity, but you need to just, and then have that be
Tape on
it.
his mouth, okay?
All right.
I'm sorry.
Watch that.
We have recreation assets.
What about the $4,000 request?
That comes in other business. We have to update 2 more subcommittees. They're both
Okay.
briefs.
Good job, Todd.
I was being facetious.
We have recreation assets. Are we moving on to that report? And I believe, Michael, you were at that meeting, were you not?
I was at that meeting, but I did leave early. I think our update is we are walking the River Loop Trail on Tuesday morning with Jensen, et cetera, to, I guess the idea is to map out what's potentially feasible without incorporating a lot of the wetlands.
So for those of you at home that may not know about this is called the River Loop Trail that would extend from the East End Park, whatever we're calling it, throughout along the banks of the Ottaquechee River and then back. So a loop trail that would increase a pedestrian path, multimodal path, potentially. And so Jensen and White was the firm that we hired to actually do a feasibility analysis and design of this. So it would be great to see what they come back with.
Yeah, hopefully the snow is gone by Tuesday, otherwise.
It's already been postponed once.
Oh, well, it's supposed to be warm this weekend.
It'll be muddy.
Let's hope. Yeah. Okay, is that it? So the website and promotion report.
Yeah. I'm happy to.
Yeah, it looks like you guys talked about a lot of stuff last week, so.
Yeah, so the website, I'm happy to report on some of the metrics. Users are up 56% to the website overall. Social media accounts are up, followers 3 to 5%. I found it interesting that the Woodstock Instagram sent as many people to the Woodstock VT website as housebeautiful.com did on its list by including us among the most beautiful small towns in America. I think that speaks highly to the efficacy of our followers and the fact that they actually click through. These are all good things. The newsletter that is being sent out has now reached almost 1,000 inboxes. The open rate is between 35 and 40%, which is pretty good. We had a meeting of the website's editorial committee, which will be meeting 4 times a year to set a yearly calendar to help direct those newsletters and social media accounts and the website overall. We were looking to fill 2 community seats. There are 2 seats for the community on that board. And we decided that we really wanted to find people who had expertise in social media, in websites, in editorial stuff in order to serve on the editorial board and to broaden our reach and our knowledge base to offer something that we may not already be bringing to the table and that the chamber may not already be bringing to the table. I'm so happy to report that we have 4 applicants already that are all highly qualified for 2 slots. Each one of them has a lot of expertise in websites, in social media, so that's just, I mean, I'm pretty stoked about that.
That's great.
So we will be interviewing people over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll have another, this last meeting was more of an organizational meeting. We didn't really actually even cover any of the stuff that we had hoped to for the editorial board, for the purposes of the direction of the website. Rather, we were kind of figuring out what we were and how we should organize ourselves and fill those 2 seats. So it was a very effective meeting, and we will meet again.
That's great. And logistically, we did arrive at a new contract with Origin to provide maintenance services for the website. So we've signed a new 12-month contract at a very reduced rate, half of what they had been charging us previously. So we're very excited about that.
How'd you get to do it?
They were very kind.
Yes, they were very kind.
Yes. And begging actually helped a lot. But so they did extend to us a contract, and then if we want to make any kind of changes to the features or functionality of the website, that is something that we said that we would partner with the chamber and try to figure out what that is, and then enter into an agreement with them to pay for a certain number of hours to do that kind of work. But so far, that is looks like it's pretty good right now. So we wanted to move it to the different hosting site that, upon reflection, may not be a desirable. Retroflexion?
I got it right there. That's a good one. Retroflexion.
Retrospect. So we have, is that it on the website promotion? Okay. We have other business, and this is the other business where we wanted to talk about the policy that we have. And I tried to find the policy for funding ongoing expenses. And I would look to the Economic Resources Committee and also Barry, your recollection, because we had at one point designated a certain percentage of all of the incoming funds from the local options tax towards different buckets on a percentage basis of what we were receiving. And I think the latest iteration of that was about $50,000, and I think of that was maybe $25,000 or $30,000 towards civic beautification, but I cannot find the notes from when that happened, and I was hoping that you might remember. Barry, do you?
All I recalled was, and it may be an old number, and I think it's an original number, was 60% for promotion, 30% for civic improvements, and 10% for administrative. And then I think the kind of restriction against ongoing was one of the grant guidelines, but I'm not sure that it was formally codified.
Okay, thank you. And I think we'll find in the minutes that there was at one point we even got down to 21%, I believe, was the allocation for a particular part of the fund. And
yeah, and that was for that was community grants, was 21%.
Okay, that was small community
but
grants.
I don't think we distinguished what those were, but it was 21% for community grants,
Okay.
Community grant program.
All right, so we don't have anything that's really in writing about how much money is to be allocated towards civic beautification, as far as I can find in the notes. Does that seem?
Well, I had done a budget back when I first started, before I really knew what was going on, and we did put some numbers there, but it was never formally adopted. We just put it on the table. So that's that, and that had like $10,000 in it as a sort of ongoing. But what it didn't do, that was an annual number as opposed to going into any of the big bets. And there was all the money that was still unallocated from previous years that is available. So what I put together for a budget was really just ongoing, an annual sort of allocation.
Do you remember what that number was?
I can tell you what that number was because I have it right here.
Because it's still the last operating budget that we had proposed.
Yeah, but it was never adopted, so it's.
But that's separate from community grants, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. So when we did it last June, we had put in, when I threw this out just to get the conversation going, we had $10,000 in there for beautification, and then total civic improvement expenses of $40,000. So that included the 10 for
civic beautification. Okay.
But that was, we really haven't done anything with that budget since it was done back last May.
Right, I guess what I'm asking is that because we don't have necessarily a policy, we do have a policy in place, whether it's formally written in minutes that we can't find, about the prohibition of ongoing expenses being funded from grants. I know it's in different places. I tried to find it on my old computer and I couldn't.
What's in the criteria on the website, which is not it's what we desire. Right. By the way, it's not, I think we're going to discuss whether we continue to desire it, but currently it's very clear that we've published a set of criteria for community grants.
Right.
Which the lights and flowers proposal meets some of those. Like it's economic development, I think we consider beautification. We considered the grant for the lights to be economic development because it beautifies, meaning the big lights.
Right.
It's hard to say that if the big lights beautify, that the small lights don't. But on the other hand,
one time, every time.
on the other hand, this proposal doesn't meet some of our other criteria. One of which is ongoing.
Right.
One of which is, there's no actual proposal. It doesn't meet it includes in-kind donations, which our grant policy says we want to not include, and so therefore we're paying for the whole thing. So we have to think of it in that. Well, that should be included in our thinking. I'm not trying to.
But what's on the website and what we've published is actually just a derivative of an underlying policy, which I can't find.
I see. Okay, so I didn't know that. Yeah. That was before my time.
Yeah. So that was and so going back to looking at what that original policy was, that's what we have to actually change. And I think this is the time to open up the discussion. Is that something we really want to do, and bring it back to the select board and say we'd really like to consider funding ongoing expenses for these types of categories.
Alternatively, could this be categorized under the beautification budget?
The beautification?
Rather than changing the guidelines for community grants and the guidelines as such, which I think is important. I would argue against changing those guidelines because they do offer an important structure for judging applications that have been, we do want grant proposals that are startup costs, that are one time, that will be, that we're not incurring supporting costs for. So this proposal is slightly different. However, to change the grant guidelines could open the door for a number of proposals that we really would not necessarily want to have to turn down. That might be valid, but that might also really incur a lot of ongoing expenses for the EDC that might one time be considered in support of economic development, but on the sixth go-round, it would be pretty hard to prove that something was continuing to improve the economic outline of the town. Now, this is a different thing. So I would argue for putting it in the civic beautification bucket rather than community grant bucket.
Wow. Well, I think that this is one of the reasons why it would be beneficial to revisit this whole program and say, one, we could freshen our memory about a few things and say, oh yeah, I remember that now. This is how we should handle it, and then maybe make some adjustments in some other areas and look at what John is proposing in terms of revamping some things. I think all that would be beneficial, having just, I don't know, would you go into an executive session? What would you do with that? How would you handle that?
No, this is really a discussion about just the policy that we've in the past, recommended to the select board, and
Yeah.
we want to change what that policy says.
Yeah.
So it's not objective at all.
Okay.
I think it should be public. We're not bound to listen to the public. I mean, we're bound to listen,
I-
we're not
I
bound to
just-
agree.
I'm just curious, you know, how long this meeting is gonna take.
Macy, will you erase that last 30 seconds?
But I think it's 7 million again. I hate to be redundant, but I think it's 7 million would be very beneficial to us
Yeah.
all.
But I think that there's a time issue on the table when it comes to this specific grant.
Yeah.
Not its recurrence
Oh, sure.
necessarily,
Yeah,
but this
yeah.
specific.
Like this
grant.
$4,000 that I'm trying to squeeze out of you guys.
So I guess, yeah, do we need to change the policy, or would we entertain a request and then make an exception to the existing policy without changing the policy?
Yeah.
Well, I suggest that if you can't find the policy, that might be an issue because you can't understand how you need to adjust it.
Well, I couldn't find it.
Well, I can't find, I'm looking for it here. Everything I have, that was given to me that is now in an archive, and it's not in my archive.
Yeah, I think it's in the select board minutes.
It must be, if you asked us to approve
Do
it.
you know when it, approximately when it was? And I'll definitely do
6 months after we founded the EDC the second time.
So,
We spent.
It was just after I started.
so when?
And I don't remember when I started.
Could I just ask from a timing point of view, if this were approved or not, but if it
What were
were
approved, John?
approved, sorry?
What would-
If we're talking about the flower and light budget,
Yeah, okay.
if this were approved 1 month from now, would that present an insurmountable problem? Because if it wouldn't, then I agree with Jeff that I agree with Joe I'm sure we're all a little bit fatigued with making exceptions at every meeting to each of our policies. We can't defend, I think that's one of the reasons why people are a little bit unclear about what we're accomplishing, is because we run the risk of not standing for anything. I think we have an opportunity, whether we agree with the direction that the ERS proposed, or whether we reject it and reconfirm our commitment to the current policies, or anything else. I think we can come out of that special meeting with a clearer sense of what we think is best for economic development. And in that case, we can then consider this flower and light request according to that policy. And it may be very easy for us to pass it, and we can do it 1 month, if 1 month from now doesn't present an insurmountable problem.
It does, for the flowers. Because they get planted the week after the school vacation. And then they grow in the greenhouse until the week before,
The 20th.
before Memorial Day.
Plus they just grow it, you're gonna do it anyhow, so you're gonna.
No, we're not. We are not going to do it. I have a board member who is going to buy the plants and sell them to his property management people.
So was your expectation that today we would be voting on expending these funds?
Well, I had really no expectation. I came at the request of Jeff.
Jeff
I have
had
had, or Joe, I've had a very difficult time in the past here, so to even come before you and ask for money is not an easy event for me. And so I just know that we do not have $5,500 to pay for maintenance of the plants this year. We have received a grant from the Garden Club and a grant from Rotary to buy the plants. But we have no funds available this year.
Come from last year.
What's the exact money again you're looking for? Because I was kind of
think that's-
unsure when
It
you
was
broke it all down.
$5,000.
And you can take the lights off the list right now. I mean, they're obviously not,
The timing of that is obviously, we didn't.
it's really the $5,500 that is the maintenance.
Carrie came to us.
I mean,
That was 2 years ago.
Well, if there's money in beautification, could you possibly, you've got money that you've considered in the past, set aside a certain percentage, this is well below that, for beautification. Could you not take it out of that budget without?
If there was an application that we could consider, that was a full, I'm sure you understand that it's difficult to receive a spreadsheet that lays out a couple of numbers and say, yes, taxpayer money should go there. So that's why we have an application, that's why we have granting cycles, and we get the applications on paper, et cetera. So.
Well, I think what Julia's suggesting is a potential solution. If you were to simply submit, another way to go about this is if you were to submit an application, we have had grant applications for beautification before, like the lights on the town green, I think was a grant application, maybe.
Yes.
So if you were to submit that, this is a small town, it's not a gigantic bureaucracy, we can consider it quickly, and I would suggest that you just do the flowers for now, because it'll, and just lay out why you think it meets as many of the criteria it meets. I'm sure the ERS can meet quickly to discuss it, and we can give you an answer before, and we're going to have a special meeting before next month. So we can use that meeting, 5 minutes of it, to discuss this and hopefully approve it.
And we still have to go to the select board.
Oh, sorry, that's right.
Giving us a pathway.
We still have to.
Well, no, sorry, I
We'd still
apologize.
have to get the money approved
I
by
have
the
a simpler
select board.
suggestion. Take the village budget for beautification and spend it on flowers.
That certainly gets them
It's
over.
one meeting, one vote, done.
There we go.
And you've got 2 trustees here.
And it's happening next week.
You're a trustee, yes, I'm sorry, Christina Kelly, yes.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mr. Kimball?
This doesn't go.
It's being articulated that the village does not have the money.
We specifically put the $5,000 budget.
I'm relaying a message from a trustee.
But I think what we're trying to open up is a path, not only just for this, but also for looking at the lights, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about, it's not just the flower baskets of the lights, because we know it's a big expense, and it's always a question with these community things, well, who pays for the fireworks, who pays for the star? It's all different, either organizations, the town budget, it comes out of a lot of different pockets. I hear a truck backing up. So anyway, so we're trying to open up that path for EDC.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, that's me, I'm gonna head out.
All right.
All right, thanks, Barry.
Barry, thanks, good to see you.
Good night.
So how do we,
Right, so how we're leaving it is if in fact we're not able to meet their time constraints for the flower basket, they might have another avenue through the village trustees for part of the expense of the flower baskets. But if the timing is right, then we can consider it. But our next meeting with the select board in terms of this fund is not until the 3rd week of April. Is that correct?
April 19 we have one, right?
April 19.
But that would mean you'd have to decide tonight, right?
Yeah.
Next Tuesday we have our meeting.
No, a week from
2 weeks
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
but-
Next week is the trustees, the week after the select board.
Yeah. So either one path is to go through the trustees for this particular need for the flower baskets, and the other path is to go for the Christmas lights through the EDC. That's one particular option with it.
Or go to both through the EDC.
You could come up
with an application.
Yeah, and it might be, we'll do half, trustees do half.
Good question.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what I was gonna say, is that this has come up over and over again, the lights and the flowers. It's just like, it has to happen, because it happens every year, it can't go away, everybody agrees on that. The select board, the trustees, and the EDC need to put their heads together and figure out how it gets paid for every single year, and that's it.
Well, as I suggested earlier, we could just take on the responsibility, EDC could take on the responsibility of paying for the lights and the flower baskets annually with a cap on it, because it's going to vary from year to year. And if it exceeds that cap, then they can come in and explain why and how much more they're going to need than the cap. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think, but we can't necessarily vote on that right now.
Let's do it.
Okay.
What's the cap?
Thanks.
Oh, no, she said
I
we
said
can't.
we can't.
Oh, we can't do that. I thought you said you can. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'll turn this up a little
Simple
bit here.
apostrophe and a T missing.
Yeah.
well, sorry, is April 19th, which is the date of the select board meeting, is that too late to?
No, because that's during vacation week.
Okay.
It's really the week following that we deliver the baskets
well,
and the kids do their thing.
Well, can I suggest that at least at one path that the subcommittee, that you put together an application, which you give it to us tomorrow. It won't, I mean, it takes some care to do it. We've just rejected an application tonight because it didn't, we asked several times and it didn't follow what we had asked for. So take some care and think, but it won't take a long time to do it. We'll do our best to, would you agree, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll do our best to consider it and then bring it, and hopefully the select board will meet. If it doesn't have our special meeting prior to the 19th.
Well, you just have to be careful about the select board, because technically they're supposed to have items that are on their agenda to them a week in advance of their meeting.
We'll put it on the agenda a week in advance.
So you just need to make sure.
We
that
just
they
made,
have
won't.
time. And I'm just warning, I am on vacation until I'm not going to be here for the next select board meeting, so somebody else will.
Are you going to be here tomorrow?
Yes.
Can you tell them that we want to have this on their agenda?
We won't put it on the agenda. Now, whether or not the item is to discuss the lights proposal.
But then then we would just need to get the whole commission's vote on suggesting it to the.
No, we don't, we're not saying, we don't have to say what we're suggesting, we just have to say that it's on the agenda.
Yeah, no,
The suggestion is on the agenda.
Well, okay.
We don't know what the suggestion is.
Yeah,
great.
we will.
Just get on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
As a matter of $4,000 for Sophie. Now, we put that off for the next meeting, and we go through the regular channels. It'll probably be 2 months before that $4,000 trickles down into reality, and we'd like to get started sooner than 2 months from now. Particularly if we're going to have another meeting to discuss what we're going to discuss.
Candidly, I thought there was a horse that you needed to put in front of that cart, which is to have that meeting, to come with the proposals as you had suggested, and have the meeting saying these are ideas, and then, which as you had mentioned, I believe, Beth.
Right, but those ideas have to be generated by people more than us three. I think those ideas have to be generated with some help from people like Sophie, like Jack Rossi, like maybe, hopefully, I can get a hold of Tim Lyle, and generate some ideas from that to be presented at the next meeting.
But there are a lot of ideas in the report that exist,
But
right?
she has to be paid if she wants to come
It
back.
strikes me that there are a lot of ideas in the report, right? That
Yes,
we've already
there are
paid
a lot
for.
of ideas in the report, but, we already discussed that on the 21st.
No.
Or at least presented them.
No, exactly, no, that's exactly the point. Those ideas were presented.
Right.
I think what the community was saying is they now want to give feedback on those ideas. They gave some at the meeting, but most of the meeting, appropriately, was presenting the ideas. That's what 80% of the meeting was that, which is exactly what it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
It was
but
great.
I think, John, there was considerable discussion.
There was.
About those ideas.
There was, but there was
There was
all,
some input on those ideas.
there was.
So if there's going to be a certain amount of redundancy, don't you think?
I think there will be.
Yeah. So is that necessary?
To
Or
whom?
can we get-
To
or can we
whom?
get-
Yes.
Can we get going on this thing? Instead of having more discussion, just get some action going.
I think the answer is no.
Right. I would vote for, I think that people will feel, making their redundant comments, they will feel better about it.
By making them redundant comments.
I'm already in trouble on the video.
This is what people watch.
Make sure you get all that, miss.
Drop a viewership for the next. No, I think whether it's redundant or not, people want to.
Dad, it sounds like you have a hoop to go through before you get that one.
Please, just one more.
Yes, we will.
I thought there was a lot of
Do that, maybe
representation
on
at the
April
meeting, that there was
15th.
going to be a follow-up meeting, that
Yes.
people were going to be, there's going to be notice of it, and people were going to come and have the opportunity to comment on the report. I felt that was said several times, actually.
Yes.
We will do that.
By you and by Charlie, both. I think.
Multiple, yeah.
We'll do it, maybe April 15th. It's a Monday.
Tax day.
Night. It is.
Sounds like fun. Everyone will be in a great mood.
Because we've all had to pay this year.
Yeah, I would suggest not doing it that day.
Maybe not.
That is other business. Is there any other business? Is there any other new business?
Very,
Yes.
very small. We've had a suggestion by a engaged citizen, which I think is a great idea, but I can't claim it for myself. This person is here and can raise their hand if they would like to take credit for it. That we have at least one meeting in South Woodstock. We can pick July or September or something, but I think at least one, maybe two, but let's just start with one. I think it's a really, it's an obvious thing to do.
Let's do it.
And the second, in the same vein,
Where? Fire station?
Need signage.
The only large,
Ransom Tavern?
Ray, do you want to take credit for that idea? Oh, sorry.
It's a
It's
great
a good
idea.
It's an excellent idea. Secondly, you'll notice a large pile of paper, wasted paper, but not wasted because we used it to give out all the documents. Everyone is doing that. We don't want to do that. It's better to give out the documents than not to give them out, but it's better to not have documents. So, does everyone follow? As people come to the meetings in the past and they don't have any idea what we're looking at. By the way, this is true as far as I can tell for every meeting that's held in this room. I've never, frankly, been to meetings like that where the documents aren't projected, but certainly if they're not projected, they're usually handed out. So we've got copies here, but it's not very sustainable to be printing all this stuff out. Would we like to move to a PowerPoint format, which would mean that these documents wouldn't be I mean, you can't project this stuff. So would we like to move to a PowerPoint format, which would then avoid the paper and would let everyone see?
Up on the wall?
Yeah, up on the wall.
Sure.
Or,
Yes, we have Mika saying yes. It makes sense as long as, and I think you've addressed it, that information is also available on the website.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then can you when you put your listserv reminder about this meeting, can you give us the link to remind us that it's there?
Yeah.
And then we should read these reports. If we're going to comment on them, we should read the reports before we come, otherwise, because the discussion tonight was much better than just reporting what's written.
But really, the hard part of all of that is the deciding to change the format of things and project it. So we don't have to decide that tonight. I would just suggest that for a short period of time, we hand out the documents until we decide that. I'm not pushing for a decision. I just wanted to raise it because I feel like the worst thing we can do is to have meetings and to have the people not know what we're looking at.
Well, the question is, do we need to have any more information before deciding?
I don't.
I think the only information is who's going to set it up and handle it at every meeting.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, it also depends on how many people we think are in the room. I mean, I don't think we should be printing 30 copies of things. And also, the other thing is that I go to a lot of public meetings and I do read all the information and I have mine available electronically. So I'm usually either looking at it on the phone. So this group tonight is not doing as much of that, but I've certainly been to many meetings where people are well informed and they don't have paper. So I think that it's just as a policy, we should really be thinking about not having paper if we don't need to.
Right, and my view is that an even higher priority than that is people knowing what's going on, whether they have their laptops with them or not. And I think both are desirable, I agree, but if we have to choose between not having paper and having people not know what's going on, which is the choice we've made in the past, I would argue, my view, and I think Sally and I may disagree with this, I would argue that it's more important for people to know what's going on. So that, for example, at chamber meetings, people don't say, what are they spending money on, because we didn't put up the PowerPoint slide that shows exactly what we're spending money on.
Also, if it's up there, people watching TV can be much better informed because they don't have access to this. And
They do. They have it on the website.
Well, they do, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean they've accessed it, and they can follow the meeting along in a much more informed way if they can see.
It's harder to read.
Kelly, can I suggest that we figure out, that until we figure out a way to execute this, that we keep doing what we're doing, but that we try to figure out is there a process by which we can easily have PowerPoint so that we don't have to
Can it
burden.
be printed on 100% recycled paper to make everyone in the room feel better?
And then recycle it afterwards.
Yes.
Recycle it.
All right.
I think we put it up on the wall.
Think about it.
I would entertain a motion to pursue moving towards a digital copy and also keeping also being able to hand out the agenda only.
Yeah.
And everything else is available in digital format and project the rest.
Okay,
Second. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Mika, did you vote?
Mika's gone.
Mika's
Aye.
gone.
No, Mika's
Aye,
gone.
thank you,
Barry's
Mika.
gone.
Yes, Barry's gone. Wonderful, let's do it. Yeah.
I just did a search, Woodstock, Vermont EDC. I came onto a page, Economic Development Commission. I don't know where these documents are. I don't see anything, how I get to the EDC page.
townofwoodstock.org.
What's that?
Townofwoodstock.org.
Yeah, it is. And here's the page, Economic Development Commission. Here's the page, I'm on it. And there's a list of people. The reason I bring this up is that as someone sitting here, I want to be able to get to whatever page I want without having to that. And could the packets, and I don't know how it's on there, obviously you have this information here someplace already.
The problem is you're on the old page.
I'm telling you,
No,
I understand.
I understand.
But that's how I would get to it.
I understand. It's through, the page is 3 days old. It's the same problem we had
Oh,
at the
okay.
beginning. It'll be fixed very shortly.
Then, in that case, my suggestion would be that the packet of material doesn't go up as 5 or 6 different PDFs, but it's one PDF for any particular meeting, so you don't have to search through it. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, and we will print the exact URL for that page on the agenda, which will be here. Yeah, so then you can just type it in as you're looking at it.
It'll be when the agenda comes out, correct?
Yes, it'll be when the agenda comes out, but we'll have, on the paper copy that's here, if people can. All right, that's cool. It's nice to move to a paper.
Motion to adjourn.
There's been a motion to adjourn, is there a second? Second. It's not debatable, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, nay. We're adjourned. Mika.